Ralph Corella, aka Sodaraptor, is a game designer and artist who has a particular fascination with lo-fi, low-poly 3D art in the vein of late 90s video games. Along with frequent collaborator Jerome Lester, aka Ragnarok6, Sodaraptor has been releasing games on itch.io for the past few years. One of his earliest was Dissension, an ode to Quake that has procedurally generated levels where you can pick only one weapon at a time, but each level you can choose a new compounding power-up. It's not a great Quake clone, but it is a good indicator of Sodaraptor's early work. As power-ups feed into one another, the game quickly gets goofy. Vampire upgrades let you steal health for damage done, as ricochet bullets ensure that even wild misses hurt something, as speed upgrades propel you even faster through the game space that already has a grapple hook. It's not really a balanced or interesting game, but it is a funny game, with upgrades that cause bad guys to pop like piñatas and guns that launch other guns. But at the same time, you have this really great Quakey tone, gray and brown and blue, industrial and gothic, and all exuding that lo-fi, low-poly retro game love. Then in 2021, Sodaraptor released the demo for Pathogen X. Featured in the haunted PS1 demo disc of 2021, Pathogen X is a love letter to Resident Evil games. Here the production values are notably improved from Dissension, where that game was made in a month and you could feel it in its limited weapon selection and enemy variety. It's clear time was taken to build Pathogen X up as a vertical slice of what had been envisioned as a full game. It's slickly produced, from the game's brief intro to its classic door transitions. It plays better than Dissension 2, with exploration and action beats that punctuate one another nicely, becoming more intense once you get the vaccine and need to escape the lab, and climaxing with a boss fight right in front of the elevator. There's a structure to a play session in a way that Dissension didn't really have, which makes it much more satisfying. It's still just a demo, so you're not really looking at a full game, and it's too action-focused to really be scary, and the resources are never quite scarce enough to provide you with the sense of fight-or-flight dread that pervades Resident Evil proper, but the game's enthusiasm for old-school survival horror is infectious, and it shows a clear growth for Sodaraptor as a game developer. And his love of late 90s game aesthetics, comedic sensibilities, and interest in horror really come together in today's main game, Hypnagogia Boundless Dreams. The premise of Boundless Dreams is that the world of dreams is in trouble. The dream crystal that stabilizes the various dreams is shattered, and its shards have been scattered. You are a young dreamer who has been tasked with retrieving them, lest all of the dream world slowly decay into nightmares, and you never wake up. But the narrative is mostly just a framing device. What makes this game work are the various dreams you visit along the way. Like Hyperbolica, another game I covered recently, Hypnagogia involves stepping into various themed worlds. But where Hyperbolica's lands were all about toying with its unique rendering style, what sets Hypnagogia's dreams apart is their incredible sense of tone. And that's really what made me fall in love with this game. Almost all of its worlds are vibes on vibes on vibes. It's one of those games where you just want to stop and exist in its spaces for a little bit, because they resonate so strongly with a specific emotional space or idea. Hanging out in the shady, verdant pathways through the forests of the mushroom world is so soothing. I can't help but brood as I take in the sense of loss and isolation and regret you get in Iceworld's frozen wastes and learning about the mournful fate of its residents. And the shimmering waters and brightly colored lo-fi geometry of Mistworld is at once nostalgic and somehow optimistic. It's all rendered in low-poly art with low-resolution textures, but there's a lushness to all of it. Water twinkles, and the sun pops through holes in the canopy, and mist hugs the ground. There's even a really subtle depth of field blur applied when objects get super close to your view. It's easy to make lo-fi art that feels flat and dead, but Sodaraptor knows how to animate these spaces so that they have a heft and life and texture, and it's simply a joy to walk around in them. So just exploring these spaces, talking to their cute residents, and doing whatever you have to do to get the crystals and move on to the next dream is already pretty enjoyable. But that exploration is made even more engaging by this being one of the rare titles these days that actually hides a pretty substantial amount of content from players. Scattered in and among the dreams you have to visit to progress through the game are actually entirely new dreams. And sometimes these hidden dreams tie back into the main dream. The desert world serves as something of a prequel to Iceworld, which it's hidden inside of. Or they may just be completely unrelated. Mushroom World holds an entire Zelda-style dungeon called Forest World inside of it that's only related insofar as Mushroom World is clearly Mario-inspired, so why not make its hidden world Zelda-inspired? It's a game that has everything from fantasy gem mines to abstract space stations. So why include it here in spooky season discussions? Well, it's a game about interpreting dreams as short video game vignettes, and nightmares are a sort of dream. And make no mistake, some of these worlds are nightmares. Not all of them, mind you, or even most of them. I mean, one of them is a candy world. But what's cool is that the structure of the game, having all of these standalone vignettes, allows for Hypnagogia to toy with a few different flavors of horror because each dream tries to stand as its own thing visually and tonally. So let's talk about the spooky bits of the game and what makes them neat. A few of these are secret levels, and I'm going to go into the details on them, so spoilers, I guess, if you're looking to go in completely blind. Anyway, let's start with Haunted World. This one is actually not a hidden level. Towards the back of the game, the nightmares start to become dominant, and this is the first actively spooky one. And it rides a line that's just a hair spookier than, like, the Haunted Mansion, but there's some lovely touches as you play. You find yourself on a foggy path at night, and at some point you hear footsteps crunching loudly somewhere off in the forest beside you. You come across a gravedigger named Grady, who's toiling in a colorful cemetery and who gives you keys to the mansion ahead, which is decked out in appropriately Halloween-y garb. You enter the mansion to find a slightly cartoony skeleton who instructs you to find his missing heart. And like, this mansion is one of those great vibes places I was talking about. Just cobwebs, lightning, thunder, it's all very arch, but it totally sells the slightly campy but still spooky, dark and stormy night vibe it's going for. Eventually, after solving some simple puzzles for bedsheet ghosts and seeing some creepy paintings get defaced, you make your way to the library. The key to the cellar is on top of the shelves, so you climb up as thunder rolls and rain pours, and just as you grab it, everything goes deathly silent. You go to leave, and the door slams shut behind you, and the way you came in is now a spiral that ends with you walking on the ceiling. Where a hallway full of cobwebs had been, there's now a small platforming section above some crimson water, or at least, you hope it's water. You approach an ominous elevator soaked in red light, and, with no other options, you go down, down, down. Finally, you descend to the cellar and see this. With nowhere else to go, you follow it into the fog and find a refrigerator, using the keys you found in the library to retrieve the king's heart, and... I love this whole world because it's just so cartoonishly spooky. It's got monsters and bodies and sheet ghosts and jack-o'-lanterns and stormy nights, and it's just a big chunk of Halloween, and I love that. But they're not all that on the nose. If you want something a little more subtle, take the next mandatory level of the game, Mall World. As the name would suggest, Mall World starts off as an empty mall at sunset. It's beautiful in a way, with purple-pink clouds peeking through the skylights and neon lights circling the main hall's fountain. But it's also a little sad. It feels like a mid-90s mall in its 2020s decay, given how all of the shops seem to be closed up, and it's also creepy to see a space usually bustling with shoppers and retail workers utterly devoid of life. There's just the hum of fluorescent lights, the chugging of escalators carrying no one, and the endlessly optimistic but utterly soulless muzak. It's definitely going for the same sort of liminal space sense of horror you might find at an airport at 2 a.m. or a hotel that's closed for the season. A place whose purpose has ended, and thus a place you have no reason to be, and yet you're there, giving it a quiet discomfort. The game directs you to a closed, abandoned, gutted department store, where at the very back of the dressing room, you hear a small child sobbing. She says that she was trying on clothes, but her mom disappeared and she's worried she's lost, but would feel a lot better with her teddy bear. You leave to go and get... That was weird. You leave to go and get the bear from a nearby toy store, but not before the floor falls out and turns into a platforming section. But you successfully manage to get the bear from a nearby toy store without incident. Upon returning, she states that she's hungry and asks for a pretzel from the food court. So you start heading that way, perhaps noticing that the mannequins are looking a little worse for wear. You get the pretzel from the food court and begin your trek back to the department store, except now things are starting to look noticeably different. The Muzak sputters to a halt. The sale signs are now all torn, the escalators rusted over and stopped, the fountain is full of fetid water, and the stores that were previously just closed are now boarded up. Making your way back to the department store, you find it flooded, a tarp covering the store's name. Blobs that are probably flesh but are otherwise unidentifiable dot the sales floor and completely block the store's exit. You find your way upstairs and make your way to the back of the dressing room, where you give the girl her pretzel and... You turn and leave as fluorescent lights flicker above you, but the mall has been completely transformed into a grungy, rusted, industrial space. What had started as a quiet, liminal discomfort is now an actively hostile space as you make your last desperate play for the crystal. And once you finally get it... And that's how that dream ends. I love the escalation in tension in that dream, from a peaceful and even beautiful place to something much, much darker. Finally, there's my personal favorite, School World. School World is a hidden nightmare within a nightmare accessed by falling into an open grave outside of the mansion in Haunted World. When you do, you find yourself in a high school circa 2009. There's an intense snowstorm outside, with drifts blocking all of the exits. Seemingly, the only way out is deeper into the heart of the building. Much like Mall World, part of the upsetting sense here is that of a liminal space. A school in a blizzard, at night, when no classes are being taught and no teachers or staff or students are present, is a building without purpose. So, why are you here? Unlike Mall World, though, malevolent forces make themselves apparent more or less immediately. As you make your way down the school halls, you look in one room and can see something, but you can't quite make it out. Another room ominously just has a single seat facing the door. Towards the end of the hallway, there's a locked-off stairwell, and if you look, there's a shadowy, unmoving figure that you can't quite make out. But you do get the sense, despite its faceless nature, that it's watching you as if it views your existence in this space as much of a violation as you do it. You round a corner to the main hall where a ghastly figure walks into darkness too deep for you to follow. Down some stairs, you see a similarly shaped specter leave a bloody handprint on the wall and walk away. And hey, you also notice that you can now reach the landing you saw the shadowy figure on earlier, and when you go there, you see that you and it have traded places, reinforcing the sense that there's a shared fear between you. Knowing that you need a flashlight to enter the darkness, you head back to where you came from to find a classroom door newly opened and shiny keys just sitting there on the desk. and the school's hallways start rearranging and closing paths to funnel you in specific directions, and you're pushed towards the resource supply office to find a flashlight. Which you do. The halls again shift, pushing you up that spooky stairwell where you saw your doppelganger. A door slams, and what had been a closed office is now a room in ruins. To the side is a chalkboard with "You're not here" scribbled over and over and over. With the flashlight, you can now walk down the shadowy hallway from earlier. In the darkness, you pass by an opening sealed with barbed wire and covered in red cloth. With nowhere else to turn, you delve deeper. You arrive in what looks for all the world like a quad or a lunchroom, an open area with vending machines and large tables, and in the center is a statue of a small, scared humanoid figure clinging to a pair of wire cutters. You take them and return to the barbed wire. Cutting your way through, you find yourself in a rundown part of the building with even more barbed wire. To your left, inky blackness. Ahead, more barbed wire, and behind it a horde of hunched-over spirits, one of whom points you towards the only path you can take. As you descend into the corridor, you realize this is no longer a school. This is something else. Something darker. Suddenly the walls begin closing in. And just as suddenly, light and escape. But the walls continue to get tighter and tighter as your salvation recedes from you, and surely you won't make it until... you emerge back in Haunted World. Except it's changed. What was a rainy night is now a foggy afternoon, and the jack-o'-lanterns that line the mansion are gone. The mood this time is less Technicolor Halloween and more of a stay off the moors vibe. It doesn't change anything else about Haunted World after that, just how you get to the mansion, but it's a nice touch that makes the transition from the more overt horror of the school to the goofier Halloween stuff a bit smoother. But I appreciate the ways the hidden dreams can impact their parent dreams in ways that you might not expect, and this happens all throughout the game. Anyways, that's 3 little nightmares from Hypnagogia. There are a couple of others. I didn't want to ruin all of the game's spooky surprises. And like I said, the game's not all horror stuff. It's often quite cute and quite funny, and its low-stakes gameplay and rewarding exploration are even relaxing at times. More than half the game is muffin men and grumpy telemarketer business demons and helping dogs back to their owners, so don't be too put off by the creepy vibes I chose to highlight for Halloween. Or you could check out Sodaraptor's other stuff, most of which is pay what you want on itch.io. His most recent release is a stealth game inspired by Metal Gear Solid, and it's pretty rad. And he just now, like just this weekend that this video went live, released Interior Worlds, another low-poly light horror game about liminal spaces. And I, for one, can't wait to play it. Happy Halloween.